So when you think about modeling, you think of what? Melania Trump? Or maybe it's building a model airplane or something like that. Legos in our house are big with all of our grandkids and everything. These are constantly building. I got Lego parts all over my house. And my wife's into it big time too. All right, when I talk about modeling, I'm talking about, as a business owner, modeling all of the issues that have to go into making a decision. So you can see what things look like before versus what things look like after. Now, there's a whole bunch of different things that you could model. One would be the valuation of your company. What sort of systems have you put in place that will help you understand what the real value of your company is? How would the IRS look at what you're putting down on paper as a potential valuation? How will that valuation end up impacting you and your family if you want to turn around and sell the company? Or what's it going to look like for a potential buyer? So modeling is essential in just about everything you do when it comes to corporate and business planning, and that's what our firm does. We don't expect you to make one decision that's any good without doing all the type of different modeling you need to do so that you can make a smart business decision. Because without doing the modeling, you're going to make a mistake. You're going to come to a conclusion about what things might look like without having all the management information you need. So I'm going to go down a laundry list of things that I think you should be modeling. And I talked about the valuation. That's really important. Do you value the company based on the market value of the assets, adding back depreciation? Do you do it based on a multiple of earnings? How do you go about determining what the earnings before interest, taxes, dividends, and amortization looks like? What sort of a multiple should you be looking at? And that's important when you're talking about doing a buyout. Now, if you're selling to an outsider, of course, you want to model things with the highest valuation that you can possibly get. But what if it's one of your kids? What if it's a management team that you've had around for a long time? Do you really want to stick it to them with the valuation that's too high? Or do you want to model out what a reasonable valuation might look like, what reasonable terms might look like, and then model what the installment payments look like for you to get your funds for selling your shares and for them to be able to cash flow the expense of buying you out over time? And there's a bunch of different things that you need to think about. What are the tax consequences? The buyer gets to write off the interest, but they don't get to write off the principal. The seller has to think about the fact that they've got to pay income taxes on the interest and capital gain on the principal they received. The buyer cannot deduct the principal, but they can expense the interest. So as one goes down, the other one goes up, and it can impact cash flow. You have to model out the parent owner being taken off the payroll and somebody else coming in to replace them. If you don't model all that out, you might find that the company that is left with the new management team does not have enough cash flow to be able to run their operation. There's no working capital because it's all going into buying out the owner. So modeling the cash flows of a buyout is essential. You might decide, you know what, a 10-year buyout, it's too long and there's plenty of money left over, so we could do a 5-year buyout. Or you might look at a 10-year buyout and say, you know, it's stripping so much of the cash flow of the company that we better extend it to 15 years. The other thing you do as an owner is you look at all the other assets that you have and look at how those are invested and then model out what your cash flow and retirement are going to look like, and that helps determine what the buyout ought to look like. So all of that has to be modeled. If you try to figure out a good buy-sell with a founder-owner selling, whether it's to their own kids or whether they're selling to a management team, if you try to figure that out and you haven't modeled it, you're flying blind. you might as well just have dark glasses on, because you're not going to be able to see the impact of it and how it's going to benefit both the buyer and the seller. Now, estate tax planning. This is another thing. You might say, look, my assets are worth this today, and I don't have any estate tax. But then if you go in and you put reasonable growth rates on every asset that's in the estate, and you do a snapshot of what the estate's going to look like 10 years from now, you might go from having no estate tax to having millions of estate tax just with basic growth. And if you have really high growing assets that are a big percentage of your total net worth, it can be exponential. So it's very, very important to model out where you are now and what it's going to look like 10 years from now. Going beyond 10 years is fun, but I'm not sure it's that practical. I feel like it's important to make 10-year decisions on what you're doing with your planning. So if you leave everything alone, you know what it looks like. So what if you do some gifting now? What if you take some of your high growth assets and give it to the next generation now? Then model out what the tax difference is. What if you look at using irrevocable trusts? Model it out. What if you look at selling a part of your assets to a trust that is called defective, where you can actually pay the taxes for the assets in the trust, and because you sold it, the trust pays you a note and pays down the debt over a period of time, so the asset vanishes, and the estate taxes are way lower. Does it make sense to gift? Does it make sense to sell? Well, how do you know if you don't model it? And unfortunately, a lot of the attorneys and the CPAs that work in the estate planning space, they're great at doing the documents. They're great at telling you what the tax consequences might be. But modeling option A versus option B, option C, a lot of firms don't do that. And we do it. Personally, because I'm not going to make a big decision about what I'm doing with my business and my assets if I don't model it out and have some time to think about it, so I make a smart business decision. Lastly, I want to talk about executive benefit planning. You might be paying market salaries to your executive team, but you've got a lot of competition for your talent. There's plenty of other people out there that would like to poach your company and take your key management people away. So it gets to be a bigger deal than just how much do you pay a person. Many companies like to put together incentive packages that will reward and retain the business people that are in your company that are helping it become more and more profitable. Now, there's a bunch of different ways to do it. You can do a phantom stock plan where you put together basically shares that mirror real company stock, but they are basically on paper, but they have value that's just like if they own stock in the company. And the executives get the money when they die, retire, or terminate after a period of time where they vest it. So you have to model out, if you award shares to somebody today and those shares accumulate each year, maybe you give them 100 shares this year and 100 shares next year and 100 shares the next year, then their share count increases and the amount that you owe them over time increases. What's going to happen down the road is you're going to have a big liability to pay money if they die, retire, become disabled, or terminate. So you're going to have a cash flow liability that is going to build and build and build based on the growth and the shares of the stock in the company. You got to model it. You got to model out what it's going to look like down the road and what kind of cash demands the company is going to have. Then you might decide, we got 5 key people, but we're going to start with 3. And you start with 3 people because you've modeled out what this is going to look like. Another thing to think about is an incentive and retention plan where you agree to set aside a certain percentage of salary for each of your key people, and you're going to invest it. You buy mutual funds similar to what you would do in a 401k plan, and you build an account for them over time that you'll end up paying out to them later on if they die, become disabled, retire, or they terminate. Obviously, they got to be vested before they can take anything with them, and you'll put a vesting schedule together. But I, as a business owner, wouldn't make any decision about doing any of this if I don't model it and look at, well, what if I put 15% of pay away for my team? By the time they hit retirement, what's that going to look like for them? Are they going to be incentivized by that amount? Maybe it should be 20% of base pay. Maybe 15% of base pay is plenty. Maybe you do 20% of base pay for some and 15% of base pay for others. Modeling it is really, really important before you make the decision to do anything. And we're one of the few, if not the only firms in town that does a good job of modeling all these different things. We get hired and paid by companies like yours to help pull all the data together, get the org charts together, look at the family tree and who's in the business and who's not in the business, and then model out what option A looks like versus what option B, C, D. We lay all the options out so that you make smart business decisions before you start drafting legal documents and before you start changing your corporate structures or creating new LLCs or what have you. Wait to do that until you've had things modeled out properly, tested by your advisors. That's the one thing too. If we go to the work to put together models, option A, B, C, D, before we recommend you doing anything, we sit down with the lawyers and the CPAs and we say, look, these are the things that we put together. What do you think about it? Have we missed anything? Is there a different way that we could be looking at it than what we're putting on paper? And we collaborate with your other professional advisors so we can all get to a place of a good, strong recommendation that will help you, your business, and your family. So next time you see Melania and you see her doing modeling, think of us and how we help you do modeling of all the important things that revolve around your company, your family, and your key executives.